The stars had never looked so welcoming to Jake Morrison as they did that morning when his ship broke through the edge of known space. He was captain of the Earth vessel New Horizon and today would change everything for his species. The ship carried 50 of Earth's best people, including scientists, engineers, diplomats, and soldiers. They had been traveling for 8 months to reach this point where alien signals had been detected. Jake stood on the bridge watching the scanner readings when his communications officer called out that something big was approaching. The ship that appeared before them was unlike anything humans had ever imagined. It was 3 times the size of New Horizon and seemed to be made of some kind of living metal that shifted colors as it moved. The alien vessel moved with grace that defied the laws of physics as humans understood them. Lisa Carter stepped beside Jake and watched the alien ship with wonder rather than fear. She was Earth's top diplomat and had spent years preparing for this moment. Her job was to make first contact go smoothly and establish peaceful relations. She had studied every piece of alien communication that Earth had intercepted, and felt ready for whatever came next. The alien ship sent a message in perfect English which surprised everyone on the bridge. The voice was mechanical but polite as it welcomed the humans to Council Space and invited them to follow to the nearest station. Jake ordered his crew to accept the invitation and they began following the alien vessel deeper into what they would learn was the territory of the Galactic Council. The space station they approached was massive beyond human comprehension. It housed millions of beings from dozens of different species and served as one of many administrative centers for the Council. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Ships of every size and shape moved around the station like insects around a hive. Lisa met with the station commander, who turned out to be a tall blue-skinned being called Vexstar. He belonged to a species called the Hegemony who had founded the Council 300 years earlier. Vexstar was curious about humans and asked many questions about Earth and human society. Lisa answered honestly and found that Vexstar seemed genuinely interested in peaceful contact. The Council had 47 member species, and each brought something valuable to the collective. The Zephyrians were master computer builders whose systems ran most of the galaxy's technology. The Korthek were miners who could extract resources from the most dangerous environments. The Villani could manipulate energy in ways that seemed like magic to other species. Each species had found their place in the vast community. Humans were different from the start. While other species had either tried to conquer Council space or begged for protection, humans came with genuine curiosity and offers of friendship. Lisa made it clear that Earth wanted to learn and share rather than take or demand. This attitude impressed even the most suspicious Council members who had seen too many species try to gain advantage through deception. Pete Johnson was the first human to make a real breakthrough. He was an engineer who had always been good at fixing things that others said couldn't be fixed. When he saw the Council's faster-than-light travel systems, he immediately started asking questions about how they worked. The Zephyrian engineers were amazed when Pete suggested combining human intuition with their precise calculations to make the drives more efficient. The result was revolutionary. Pete's modifications made Council ships 30% faster and 50% more reliable. Trade routes that had taken weeks could now be completed in days. The economic impact was enormous, and suddenly every species in the Council wanted to know more about human engineering. Dr. Mary Collins made the next major contribution. She was a medical researcher who had spent her career studying diseases that affected multiple species. When she arrived at the Council medical facilities, she was shocked to see how many patients were suffering from conditions that seemed treatable. The alien doctors were excellent at treating their own species, but struggled with cross-species medicine. Mary developed new treatments that worked across species boundaries. Her techniques saved thousands of lives in the first year alone and established medical clinics on 12 different worlds. Alien doctors lined up to learn her methods, and soon Mary was training medical staff throughout Council space. General Ryan Brooks brought military expertise that the Council desperately needed. For decades, they had been dealing with pirates and raiders who attacked merchant ships and border colonies. The Council's response had always been massive force that often destroyed entire systems to eliminate threats. Ryan showed them how to use precise strikes and intelligence, gathering to stop enemies without causing massive destruction. His first operation was against a pirate base that had been raiding Council ships for 2 years. Previous attempts to stop them had failed because the pirates would disappear into an asteroid field that was too dangerous for large ships to enter. Ryan took a small human strike team into the field and disabled the pirate base in 6 hours without firing a single shot. The pirates surrendered when they realized their base had been infiltrated and their escape routes cut off. The humans asked for very little in return for their contributions. They wanted to establish colonies on worlds that other species weren't using. They wanted access to council libraries and scientific databases. Most importantly, they wanted friendship and the chance to explore the galaxy alongside their new allies. The Council was happy to grant these simple requests. Human colonies quickly became popular destinations throughout Council space. Unlike other species who built isolated settlements, humans created communities that welcomed visitors from any species. Human cities featured art galleries, music venues, and restaurants that served food from dozens of different worlds. Other species found that humans were genuinely interested in learning about alien cultures and sharing their own. Ambassador Lisa Carter established Earth's first embassy on the Council capital world. She worked tirelessly to build relationships with representatives from every member species. Her weekly dinner parties became famous throughout the diplomatic community as places where real problems got solved through honest conversation rather than formal negotiations. The Council began to see humans as the perfect partners. They were innovative enough to solve difficult problems, but not aggressive enough to threaten established power structures. They were curious about other species, but not demanding of special treatment. They contributed valuable skills, but never asked for more than they gave. Chairman Vexstar often told his colleagues that humanity represented the best qualities of all Council species combined. Humans had the curiosity of the Zephyrians, the determination of the Korthak, the adaptability of the Villani, and something that was uniquely their own. That something was hope, and it spread wherever humans went. 100 years had passed since first contact, and the galaxy looked very different now. Human fingerprints were everywhere in Council space, but most alien citizens had stopped noticing them. The faster-than-light drives that Pete Johnson had improved were now standard on every Council ship. The medical techniques that Dr. Mary Collins had developed were taught in every alien medical school. The security methods that General Ryan Brooks had created protected every major trade route in the galaxy. Commander Alex Turner stood on the observation deck of Orbital Defense Platform 7 watching construction crews finish the final armor plating. This was the 12th such platform he had overseen, and each one protected a core Council world from outside threats. The platforms were massive structures that could house 50,000 people and carried enough weapons to stop an entire invasion fleet. Alex had designed every system himself using a combination of human engineering and alien technology. The work was exhausting and never-ending. Each platform took 3 years to build and required constant supervision to ensure quality. Alex had spent the last 15 years of his life moving from world to world overseeing construction projects that would protect species who barely acknowledged his existence. The alien supervisors who worked under him were polite but distant. They followed his orders because the Council required it, but they never asked his opinion about anything beyond technical specifications. Dr. Helen Rodriguez was having similar experiences on the agricultural world of Kepler Prime. She had spent 8 years developing farming systems that could feed the growing population of 31 Council worlds. Her techniques had ended famine on 6 planets and prevented food shortages that could have led to civil wars. The work required her to live in isolation on experimental farms, testing new crops and growing methods in every type of climate imaginable. Helen rarely saw other humans anymore. Her assistants were all aliens who treated her like a useful machine rather than a person. They recorded her instructions carefully and implemented her methods precisely, but never engaged in casual conversation or asked about her life outside work. She ate her meals alone and spent her evenings writing reports that were filed away without comment. Captain Ben Walsh commanded the patrol fleet that protected the galaxy's outer rim from raiders and hostile forces. His ships were crewed by volunteers from every council species, but the command structure was entirely human. No alien officer had ever been promoted to captain rank in the Outer Rim fleet, despite many having decades of experience. The Council's official explanation was that humans had unique skills for dealing with dangerous situations, but Ben suspected the real reason was that alien officers didn't want to risk their lives in such dangerous assignments. Ben's fleet had fought dozens of battles over the past decade and never lost a single engagement. His tactical innovations had become standard throughout the Council military, and his training methods were used to prepare officers from every species. Despite this success, Ben had never been invited to speak at the military academy or asked to advise the Council on defense matters. His reports were read by alien generals who took credit for his victories and never mentioned his name in their public statements. The pattern was everywhere once humans started paying attention. Ambassador Lisa Carter, now in her 70s, spent most of her time in empty meeting rooms, giving speeches to alien delegates who were busy with their personal devices. The Council had installed her in a beautiful office on the capital world and provided her with every comfort, but they rarely asked for her input on important decisions. Her role had become ceremonial, while the real diplomatic work was handled by alien bureaucrats who had learned human techniques secondhand. Lisa's weekly dinner parties still continued, but attendance had dropped significantly over the years. Younger alien diplomats were too busy to attend, and older ones seemed to have lost interest in human perspectives. The conversations that did happen were polite but shallow. No one asked Lisa about Earth's opinions on major issues or sought her advice on difficult problems. Young human leaders like Colonel Steve Parker and scientist Dr. Amy Foster began holding private meetings to discuss what they saw happening. Steve commanded a regiment of human soldiers who did most of the dangerous fighting for the Council military but were never promoted to leadership positions. Amy led research projects that produced breakthrough technologies but found her discoveries published under alien names without any credit given to human contributors. Steve and Amy represented a new generation of humans who had grown up in Council space and expected to be treated as equals. Unlike their parents, who had been grateful for any acceptance from alien species, these younger humans had spent their entire careers watching their contributions be minimized and their achievements ignored. They spoke quietly among themselves about the growing gap between human contributions and human recognition. Dr. Amy Foster's frustration reached a breaking point when her latest research project was presented to the Council Science Committee. Without her knowledge, she had spent 2 years developing new shielding technology that could protect ships from energy weapons that had previously been unstoppable. The breakthrough would save thousands of lives and revolutionize space combat, but when the results were announced, the Alien Committee chairman credited the discovery to collaborative Council research. Without mentioning Amy's name, Amy requested a meeting with the committee to discuss proper attribution, but was told that individual recognition was not important in Council science. What mattered was the collective benefit to all species. Amy pointed out that alien researchers were regularly credited for their individual discoveries, but was informed that human contributions were considered team efforts that represented the entire research community. The conversation ended with Amy being thanked for her valuable support and dismissed from the meeting. She walked back to her laboratory, wondering how long humans could continue accepting such treatment. Her work was essential to Council security, but her existence as a person seemed irrelevant to the aliens who benefited from her discoveries. Colonel Steve Parker had his own moment of clarity during a military ceremony honoring the heroes of the recent border conflicts. Steve's regiment had fought in 7 major battles and lost 43 soldiers defending alien colonies from raiders. The ceremony featured speeches by alien generals who praised the brave Council forces who had secured victory through superior tactics and technology. Steve and his surviving soldiers sat in the back row and were not mentioned in any of the speeches. After the ceremony, Steve was approached by a young alien officer who thanked him for his support role in the recent campaigns. Steve realized that in the minds of most Council citizens, humans had become invisible. Their contributions were acknowledged in private but erased from public memory. They were valuable enough to be used but not important enough to be recognized. The older generation of human leaders like Ambassador Carter counseled patience and continued cooperation. They remembered when humans had no place in the galaxy at all and felt grateful for what they had achieved. But younger humans like Steve and Amy saw a different reality. They saw a future where humans would always be junior partners no matter how much they contributed or how many sacrifices they made. The conversations between young and old grew more frequent and more intense as the years passed. Both sides wanted what was best for humanity, but they disagreed about what that meant. The older generation feared losing what they had built, while the younger generation feared accepting permanent second-class status. Neither side realized that events beyond their control would soon force them to make a choice that would change the galaxy forever. The attack came without warning on a quiet Tuesday morning when most of the Council was celebrating the Festival of Unity. General Kate Murphy was reviewing routine patrol reports when her communications officer burst into her office with news that 7 Council worlds were under simultaneous assault. The enemy ships appeared from nowhere using technology that somehow avoided all detection systems. Kate immediately activated the Council's emergency response protocols, but found that most of their standard weapons were useless against the attackers. The enemy ships carried energy dampeners that shut down alien technology within minutes of contact. Zephyrian computer systems crashed completely. Korthek mining equipment stopped functioning. Villani energy weapons became as useful as rocks. The attacking force called themselves the Outer Rim Consortium, and they had clearly studied Council defenses for years before striking. Their biological weapons were designed specifically to target each alien species with deadly precision. Hegemony citizens developed fatal breathing problems within hours of exposure. Zephyrians lost their ability to process information and fell into comas. Korthek miners found their tough skin dissolving like paper, but the most terrifying weapon was psychological. The Consortium somehow broadcasted fear directly into alien minds using frequencies that drove entire populations into panic. Millions of Council citizens abandoned their homes and fled toward the center of the galaxy, creating chaos that made military response almost impossible. Governments collapsed as leaders became too terrified to make decisions. Kate realized within the first day that only human technology still functioned against the Consortium attacks. Human ships could resist the energy dampeners because they used different power systems. Human soldiers were immune to the biological weapons because Earth life had evolved separately from Council species. Most importantly, human minds seemed naturally resistant to the psychological attacks that were destroying alien morale. The Council's response was immediate and predictable. Chairman Vexstar sent urgent messages to every human leader demanding that they solve the crisis. Kate found herself promoted to Supreme Military Commander of all Council forces within hours. Dr. Tim Roberts was pulled from his research laboratory and ordered to develop countermeasures to the alien bioweapons. Engineer Susan Clark was given unlimited resources and told to retrofit the entire Council fleet with human-designed defenses. Kate had never wanted supreme command, but she accepted the responsibility because lives were at stake. She immediately began reorganizing the chaotic Council military into something that could actually fight back. Most alien officers were too terrified to function, so Kate replaced them with human commanders who could think clearly under pressure. The Council fleet was reduced to less than half strength, but at least it could now respond to enemy attacks. Dr. Tim Roberts worked 80-hour days in his laboratory trying to understand the Consortium's biological weapons. The alien diseases were unlike anything Earth had ever encountered, but Tim found patterns that reminded him of viruses he had studied years earlier. He realized that the weapons were designed to exploit Specific weaknesses in alien biology that humans simply didn't share. Tim's breakthrough came when he discovered that the bioweapons could be neutralized using modified human antibiotics. The solution was elegantly simple but required massive production facilities to manufacture enough medicine for billions of alien citizens. Tim coordinated with human colonies throughout the galaxy to convert their industrial capacity to producing the life-saving treatments. Engineer Susan Clark faced the enormous task of retrofitting thousands of council ships with human-designed shielding systems. The work normally would have taken years, but the Consortium attacks were spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. Susan organized teams of human engineers who worked around the clock installing new defensive systems on every available vessel. The modifications were crude but effective. Human shielding could resist Consortium energy dampeners long enough for ships to escape or fight back. More importantly, the human communication systems allowed Council forces to coordinate their actions instead of fighting as isolated units. For the first time since the attacks began, the Council military could actually respond as a unified force. The war lasted 6 months, and every day brought news of new Consortium victories. 4 more Council worlds fell before Kate's reorganized forces could mount an effective defense. The fighting was brutal and desperate, with neither side asking for or giving mercy. Human soldiers found themselves fighting battles on alien worlds they had never seen to protect people who barely acknowledged their existence. The turning point came during the Battle of Centauri Station, when Kate led a combined human-alien fleet against the largest Consortium force yet assembled. The enemy had expected easy victory using their standard tactics, but found themselves facing opponents who couldn't be terrorized or disabled. Human-designed weapons punched through Consortium defenses while human tactics confused enemy commanders who had never faced such determined resistance. Kate's fleet destroyed the Consortium's command ship and captured their military leaders in a battle that lasted 14 hours. The victory broke the enemy's coordination and turned their organized invasion into scattered raids that could be handled by individual system defense forces. The war was effectively over, but the cost had been enormous, over 14,000. Human soldiers had died defending alien worlds during the 6 months of fighting. Human colonies had converted their entire economies to support the war effort, sending food, medicine, and equipment to Council worlds while their own people made do with basic necessities. Human families mourned their dead while alien populations celebrated their salvation without understanding who had actually saved them. The victory celebrations began immediately after news of the Consortium defeat reached the capital world. Chairman Vexstar organized parades and ceremonies to honor the brave Council forces who had defeated the invaders. Alien generals gave speeches about the triumph of Council unity and the strength of their combined military forces. The celebrations lasted for weeks and cost more money than most worlds spent in a year. Kate waited for someone to mention the human contribution to the victory. She expected recognition for her soldiers who had died in alien soil or acknowledgement of the human colonies that had sacrificed everything to support the war effort. She thought the Council would at least thank the human engineers and scientists whose innovations had made victory possible. Instead, Chairman Vexstar announced that the victory belonged to the unified Council species and demonstrated the superiority of alien leadership in times of crisis. Human contributions were mentioned briefly as valuable support in the official war records. The names of human commanders were buried in appendices that few people would ever read. The sacrifices of human colonies were reduced to footnotes in economic reports. Ambassador Lisa Carter, now 93 years old and serving her final term, watched the celebrations from her office window. She had spent her entire adult life building bridges between humans and aliens, but saw those bridges crumbling before her eyes. The war had shown what humans could accomplish when given authority, but the aftermath showed that the Council would never willingly share power with their human partners. Lisa requested one final audience with the full Council and was granted. 30 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon when most delegates preferred to be elsewhere. She walked into the familiar chamber where she had spent decades advocating for human interests and saw rows of empty seats. Those aliens who bothered to attend were busy with their personal devices or conducting whispered conversations with their staff members. Lisa spoke quietly for 20 minutes about partnership, respect, and the price of taking loyalty for granted. She talked about the human soldiers who had died for alien worlds and the human families who had sacrificed everything for Council victory. She reminded the delegates about the decades of human contributions that had built the prosperity they now enjoyed. She asked them to consider what kind of future they wanted to build together when she finished. Chairman Vexstar thanked her for humanity's continued service and immediately moved on to the next agenda item without allowing time for questions or discussion. The few delegates who had been listening returned their attention to their devices. Lisa's words disappeared into the silence of official indifference. Lisa Carter walked out of the council chamber for the last time. She did not look back and she did not return. The era of human cooperation with the Galactic Council was ending, and everyone in that room would soon discover what they had lost. The departure began on a Monday morning when Dr. Tim Roberts finished uploading his final research files to the Council medical database. He had spent 3 weeks writing detailed instructions for continuing his work and training alien doctors to use the treatments he had developed. Tim packed his personal belongings into 2 small cases and submitted his resignation letter through official channels. The letter was polite and professional, citing personal reasons for returning to Earth. No one tried to stop him from leaving. The alien administrators in his department assumed he was taking a vacation and would return when he felt ready to resume his duties. They had grown so accustomed to human dedication that the possibility of permanent departure never occurred to them. Tim's replacement would not arrive for several months, and by then his research projects would be falling behind schedule. General Kate Murphy completed her post-war military reorganization and submitted her own resignation 1 week later. She had spent 6 months rebuilding the Council's defense forces and training alien officers to handle routine operations. Kate transferred command to her deputy and provided detailed plans for maintaining security in her absence. Her resignation letter was filed alongside dozens of others in the Council bureaucracy and received no special attention. Kate's departure was more noticeable because she commanded respect among alien military officers who had fought alongside her during the war. Several hegemony generals asked when she would be returning from her leave, but received vague responses about Earth's need for experienced commanders. The Council military assumed that Kate would be back within a year and made temporary arrangements to cover her responsibilities. Engineer Susan Clark finished the last of her infrastructure repairs and quietly transferred her projects to alien supervisors. She had spent 8 months upgrading Council defensive systems and training local engineers to maintain the improvements she had made. Susan deleted her personal files from Council computers and submitted her resignation. Through the same official channels that other humans had used, the pattern continued across Council space as humans completed their current assignments and declined to accept new ones. Captain Danny Wilson finished mapping the last of the Council's new trade routes and then disappeared overnight with all of his navigation data. Dr. Rachel Stone wrapped up her agricultural research and returned to Earth without training a replacement. Commander Tony Cruz submitted his final maintenance reports for the orbital defense platforms and vanished before anyone could ask him questions. The departures were so quiet and professional that most alien citizens didn't notice them happening. Humans had always worked efficiently in the background, and their absence wasn't immediately obvious. The first signs of trouble appeared 3 months after the exodus began, when trade ships started getting lost on routes that had been reliable for decades. Captain Zex of the merchant vessel Star Trader found himself stranded in deep space when his navigation computer failed to recognize a jump route that he had used hundreds of times before. The route had been mapped by Captain Wilson and required constant updates to account for stellar drift and gravitational changes. Without Wilson's expertise, the navigation data became worthless within weeks. Similar problems began appearing throughout Council space as human-maintained systems started failing. The orbital defense platforms around Hegemony Prime experienced Their first major malfunction when a power coupling that Commander Cruz had designed began overheating. The platform's alien crew tried to fix the problem using standard procedures, but discovered that the human modifications required knowledge they didn't possess. Dr. Veltar of the Zephyrian Medical Institute noticed that several of his patients were no longer responding to treatments that had been effective for years. The medicines had been developed by Dr. Roberts using techniques that seemed simple but required intuitive understanding of how different biological systems interacted. Without Roberts to adjust the formulas, the treatments gradually became less effective as alien biology adapted to them. Chairman Vextar began receiving reports about human departures from various department heads who were starting to worry about maintaining their operations. The reports described the departures as temporary personnel shortages that would be resolved when the humans returned from Earth. Vextar sent polite inquiries to the new human ambassador asking when the vacation period would end and normal operations could resume. Ambassador Paul Davis was a younger man who had replaced Lisa Carter after her retirement. He was polite but less accommodating than his predecessor and seemed uninterested in the social aspects of diplomacy that Carter had emphasized. Paul responded to Vextar's inquiries with equally polite messages explaining that Earth was reassigning personnel to internal development projects and couldn't provide a timeline for their return. The Council's first attempt to solve the problem involved offering incentives for humans to resume their previous positions. They promised better housing, increased compensation, and formal recognition ceremonies that would acknowledge human contributions to Council society. The offers were generous by alien standards, and the Council expected quick acceptance from humans who had always seemed satisfied with modest rewards. Paul Davis thanked the Council for their generosity and declined all offers on behalf of Earth's government. He explained that humans had decided to focus on developing their own colonies and were not interested in returning to Council space at this time. The rejection was polite but firm and left no room for negotiation or compromise. The Council's second attempt involved direct appeals to individual humans who had held important positions. Chairman Vextar personally contacted General Murphy and offered her command of the entire Council military with unprecedented authority and compensation. Similar offers went to Dr. Roberts, Engineer Clark, and dozens of other humans whose expertise had become essential to Council operations. The responses were uniform and disappointing. Every human thanked the Council for their generous offers but declined to return to their former positions. Some cited personal commitments on Earth, while others mentioned new opportunities in human space that they found more attractive. None of them expressed anger or resentment, but their refusal to reconsider was absolute. By the end of the first year, virtually every human had withdrawn from Council space. They took only personal belongings and left behind all the infrastructure and technology they had built during their decades of service. Human colonies were evacuated quietly, with residents relocating to Earth or other human settlements outside Council territory. The departing humans caused no damage and left no destructive surprises behind. They simply collected their people and their personal possessions and disappeared into the vast emptiness of space. The silence they left behind was more devastating than any act of sabotage could have been. Trade routes became unreliable without human navigators who understood the complex mathematics of interstellar travel. Defense platforms began shutting down as their human-designed systems failed without proper maintenance. Medical facilities found themselves unable to treat conditions that had been routine for decades. The carefully balanced civilization that humans had helped build was coming apart piece by piece. The Council tried desperately to reverse engineer human technology and techniques, but discovered that human contributions involved more than just technical knowledge. Humans brought intuitive understanding and creative problem-solving that couldn't be replicated through copying their procedures. Without the people who had created the systems themselves gradually became useless. Some alien species attempted to locate human colonies and negotiate directly with Earth's government, but found that human space was now carefully defended and not welcoming to uninvited visitors. The humans had learned from their time in Council Space and had no intention of repeating the same mistakes with new alien partners. Dr. Lisa Hampton was one of the last humans to leave Council Space, and her final report summarized humanity's position with devastating clarity. She wrote that civilizations could not be built on the backs of people who were refused respect, and that partnership required mutual recognition rather than one-sided exploitation. The humans had offered friendship and received indifference in return. The report concluded with a simple statement that would haunt the Council for years to come. The humans wished the alien species success in their future endeavors and hoped they would learn to build something better than what they had lost. The galaxy was big enough for everyone, and there was no reason for conflict between humans and aliens as long as both sides respected each other's boundaries. The Council was free to govern itself as it saw fit, and the humans would do the same in their own territory. The partnership was over and would not be renewed under any circumstances. The humans had walked away quietly, but their absence would speak louder than any words they could have left behind. 2 years after the human departure, the Galactic Council was dying a slow and painful death. Chairman Vextar stood in his office looking out at the capital world and saw empty buildings, where thriving businesses had operated just months before. The great space lanes that had carried trade between dozens of worlds were now dangerous passages that few ship captains dared to attempt. The Zephyrian commercial networks had collapsed completely when their automated trading systems could no longer adapt to changing conditions. The computer programs that had managed galactic commerce for decades were designed to handle routine operations but became useless when trade routes shifted or new problems arose. Without human engineers to modify the programs, the entire economic system ground to a halt. The Korthic mining operations shut down one by one as their equipment broke down beyond repair. The mining robots had been upgraded with human technology that improved their efficiency by 300%, but the alien technicians who remained behind couldn't understand how the improvements worked. When the robots failed, entire mining colonies were abandoned and their populations fled to other worlds. The Villani energy manipulation systems that powered most Council worlds began experiencing catastrophic failures. The power grids had been redesigned by human engineers to handle increasing demand, but the modifications required constant adjustment to prevent overloads. Without humans to monitor and maintain the systems, several worlds lost power completely and had to evacuate their populations. But the worst disaster came when the Outer Rim Consortium returned for a second invasion. The scouts had been watching Council Space for months and reported that the defenses were in complete disarray. The orbital platforms that had protected core worlds were operating at less than 50% capacity. The patrol fleets that had guarded trade routes were scattered and uncoordinated. The Consortium's second attack was swift and devastating. 3 Council worlds fell in the first week without putting up meaningful resistance. The alien defenders found themselves facing the same energy dampeners and biological weapons that had nearly destroyed them 2 years earlier, but this time they had no human technology to protect them. 7 more worlds were evacuated in panic as Consortium forces advanced toward the heart of Council Space. The alien populations fled in massive refugee convoys that created chaos throughout the galaxy. Millions of beings found themselves homeless and desperate while their governments collapsed under the pressure of managing the crisis. Chairman Vextar realized that the Council faced complete destruction unless something changed immediately. He sent increasingly frantic messages to Earth offering everything he could think of to bring the humans back. He promised full Council membership with voting rights equal to the founding species. He offered autonomous human territories with complete self-governance. He suggested massive financial compensation that would make Earth the richest world in the galaxy. The responses from Earth were swift but devastating. Ambassador Paul Davis replied that humanity appreciated the generous offers but had moved beyond their relationship with the Council. Humans were now focused on building their own civilization and had no interest in returning to their previous roles. Earth wished the Council well, but would not be participating in galactic politics for the foreseeable future. Some Council species tried to force a solution through military action. The hegemony military leadership discussed launching raids against human colonies to capture essential personnel who could be compelled to return to their former positions. These discussions ended abruptly when Council intelligence reported that human space was now defended by weapons technology that was decades ahead of anything the Council possessed. The few human colonies that intelligence services had managed to locate were surrounded by defensive platforms that made the old Council systems look primitive by comparison. Human ships patrolled the borders of their territory, using faster-than-light drives that were twice as efficient as anything the Council had ever seen. Any attempt at military action would result in complete defeat for Council forces. Other species tried diplomatic approaches by sending humble ambassadors to the edges of human space. These envoys carried offers of trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense pacts that would benefit both humans and aliens. The human border guards were polite but firm in explaining that Earth was not interested in new diplomatic relationships at this time. The Zephians attempted to recreate human technology by studying the systems that had been left behind. Their best engineers spent months analyzing human modifications to Council equipment, but couldn't understand the principles that made the improvements work. Human engineering involved intuitive leaps and creative solutions that couldn't be duplicated. Through reverse engineering, the Korthik tried to hire human refugees, who might have remained in Council space but discovered that the evacuation had been complete. Every human citizen had been relocated to Earth or other human colonies outside Council territory. The few humans who had married aliens or established permanent roots in Council space had been given the choice to leave or stay, but almost all had chosen to follow their people into exile. As the months passed, individual Council species began making their own decisions about survival. The Villani negotiated a separate peace with the Outer Rim Consortium and agreed to become a client state in exchange for protection. The Zephyrians retreated to their core worlds and closed their borders to all outside contact. The Korthek mining clans scattered throughout the galaxy and became nomadic traders. The hegemony fought the longest to preserve the Council, but eventually accepted that the organization they had founded 3 centuries earlier was finished. Chairman Vexstar presided over the formal dissolution of the Galactic Council 18 months after the Second Consortium invasion began. The ceremony was brief and attended by only a handful of delegates from species that still maintained functioning governments. Some alien civilizations managed to survive the collapse by adapting quickly to new circumstances. The more flexible species learned to operate without the human-designed systems they had depended on and built simpler but more reliable alternatives. These survivors gradually rebuilt their societies on a smaller scale and focused on protecting what they could preserve rather than expanding their influence. Others fell into chaos and regression as their technological capabilities declined without human maintenance. Entire worlds lost the ability to communicate with other systems and became isolated islands in space. Some populations faced starvation when their food production systems failed, and they couldn't import supplies from other worlds. A few seas, the wisest among them, sent careful ambassadors to the borders of human space with different kinds of messages. These envoys didn't ask for the return of human workers or demand that Earth solve their problems. Instead, they requested the chance to learn how to build better relationships between different species. These humble requests received different responses from Earth. Human officials explained that they were willing to share knowledge and establish limited trade relationships with species that demonstrated genuine respect for human autonomy. The key was treating humans as equals rather than as useful tools to be exploited. The galaxy slowly reorganized itself around the new reality that humans were no longer available to solve everyone's problems. Some regions descended into warfare as competing species fought over the remnants of Council territory. Other areas became peaceful havens where species that had learned hard lessons about cooperation worked together on equal terms. Earth established a few carefully managed trading posts on neutral worlds where alien species could exchange goods and knowledge with human merchants. These facilities operated under strict rules that prohibited any attempt to recruit human workers or establish permanent human settlements in alien space. The message was clear that humans would engage with other species only as independent equals. Years passed, and the galaxy learned painful lessons about the difference between partnership and exploitation. The Council had built a civilization on the assumption that some species existed to serve others, and that gratitude was sufficient payment for essential services. The humans had demonstrated that this assumption was dangerously wrong. In the end, the galaxy became a more diverse and interesting place. Instead of one dominant council controlling everything, dozens of smaller civilizations emerged with their own cultures and technologies. Some thrived by learning to treat all species with respect, while others struggled to adapt to a universe where cooperation couldn't be taken for granted. The humans had walked away, quietly, but their absence spoke louder than any words could have. They had shown that true civilization required mutual respect rather than hierarchy, and that the strongest partnerships were built on equality rather than dependence. The galaxy would never forget the lesson, even though it had learned it too late to save the council that had once ruled the stars.